people fabricate anger and it's pretentious and it's false. It is not real and it's something that people make up. So today we are going to discuss about people fabricating anger and it not being real and how false that we bring it up to justify any of our actions. So for example, yesterday afternoon I was reading a book in a coffee shop when a waiter was passing by and spilled coffee on my jacket, right? The scenario is that. So I just bought it and it's my nicest piece of clothing, so I couldn't help it but just blew my top off. And on the other hand, I yelled at him at the top of my lungs, and I'm not normally the type of person who speaks loudly in public places, but yesterday the shop was ringing with the sound of my shouting, and because I blew it up because I was really mad and I flew into a rage and forgot what I was doing. So how about that? Is there room for a goal to be involved here? And no matter how you look at it, isn't this behavior that originates from a cause? So that is the scenario that somebody gave me, an actual occurrence which happened, and the person was justifying that because it was his best piece of clothing and he flew into a rage and shouted. So that is the bottom line. So the question is, that person, or else imagine it was you. So you were stimulated by the emotion of anger and ended up shouting, right? Stimulated by the emotion of anger, ended up shouting. Though you are normally mild-mannered and you couldn't resist being angry, it was an unavoidable occurrence. And you couldn't do anything about it, and that is what you are saying, right? By that whole situation, that is your bottom line and that is your explanation. You flew into a rage because you got angry and then you shouted, right? Because of that. But the actual explanation is, we can summarize it, because it happened so suddenly, the words just came out of my mouth and your mouth and you didn't have enough time to think, right? So then just suppose you happen to have a knife with you, right? Just suppose that you happen to have a knife with you yesterday when that happened and you blew up, you just got carried away and stabbed the person, right? That could have happened one by one. Would you still be able to justify that by saying it was an unavoidable occurrence and I couldn't do anything about it? That would be your explanation, right? That may seem a bit extreme of an argument, but still, it is not an extreme argument. If you proceed with the reasoning, any offense committed in anger can be blamed on anger, right? Anybody could do that. And will no longer be the responsibility of the person, because essentially you are saying that people cannot control their emotions. That is the bottom line, right? Well, if you ask me to explain that further your anger, that's easy. You did not fly into a rage and then start shouting, okay? It is solely that you got angry so that you could shout. Now you see the connection. So in other words, in order to fulfill the goal of shouting, you created the emotion of anger, right? So further explaining the question, because you might ask what do you mean by that. The goal of shouting came before anything else. That is the number one reason. The goal of shouting was there at the beginning, and then that is to say, by shouting you wanted to make the waiter submit to you, first to submit to you and then listen to what you had to say, because you couldn't be bothered, right? As means to do that, you fabricated the emotion of anger. So you might ask, you fabricated it, I fabricated it. That is very false. That is just falsely accusing someone. You got to be joking, right? But then why did you raise your voice? That is the question. Why did you raise your voice, right? As I said before, you blew up your top and then you were deeply frustrated. That is the scenario. But you could have explained the matters without raising your voice. That would be a counter argument. You could have explained the whole situation, what not and what has happened, without raising your voice, right? And the waiter would most likely have given you a sincere apology and then wiped your jacket with a clean cloth and then taken other appropriate measurements as well. But then he might have even arranged for it to be dry clean, on the other hand. But then somewhere in your mind, you were anticipating that he might do these things, and even so you shouted, because the procedure of explaining things in the normal words and in normal tone felt like too much trouble, because you were already frustrated that day with all the drama happening around you, people shouting, ringing, and the buzz was too much in the coffee shop and everything was frustrating. You were like, it was too much, and then you couldn't go through the whole process of normally explaining everything in a normal tone and go through all that trouble. must have seen too much too. So because of that, you try to get out of that and make this unresisting person submit to you. The tool you used to do this was emotion of anger, right? So you can tell me, and the student youth might ask me, again, like in this book, no way, you can't fool me. I manufactured anger in order to make him submit to me, right? So I swear to you, there wasn't even a second to think of such a thing. But still, I didn't think it over and got angry. Anger is a more impulsive emotion. And the philosophy of explaining this, just like the philosopher says, and that's right, anger is an instantaneous emotion. Now listen, we have another story to explain, right? So one day, a mother and daughter were quarreling loudly. So obviously when women quarrel, it's very loud, right? So then suddenly the telephone rang. And hello, the mother picked up the receiver hurriedly, and then her voice still thick with anger. But the caller was her daughter's homeroom teacher, right? So as soon as the mother realized who was phoning, the tone of her voice changed and she became very polite. Then for the next 5 minutes or so, she carried on a conversation in her best telephone voice. Once she hung up, in a moment, her expression changed and again she went straight back to yelling at her daughter, right? So the youth is asking, well, that's not a particularly unusual story, but the philosopher says, don't you see, in a word, anger is a tool that can be taken out as needed. So exactly, it is manufactured by our need to subdue something, right? Our need to overcome something. So it can be put away at the moment the phone rings, and pulled out again after it hangs up. The mother isn't yelling in anger she cannot control. She is simply using the anger to overpower her daughter with a loud voice and thereby assert her opinion. So anger is means to achieve a goal, is it? Yes, that is what teleology says, right? So that is the very best example that you can give someone. If somebody is using, anger, the emotion of anger to overcome something, to subdue someone, they are not doing it like something which they cannot control. It is something that everyone can control. They are doing it on purpose. Somebody might say, I flew into a rage. I blew my top off in a second, but still it is by choice. So that you have to take into your heart and see the reality for itself. Thank you.